So by now, we've learned that we can treat JSX like any other data type in JavaScript. We can store JSX in a variable or a constant. We can store JSX in an array or an object. We can do basically anything we can with a regular JavaScript value, like a string or a number, with JSX. So here's the next question I have for you. Do you think that we could return JSX as the return value of a function? Well, it makes sense that we could do that, right? Because under the hood, it's just its own function call that's going to be evaluated, and then the return value of that function call is what we're going to return as our own function's return value. So let me show you what I mean. Let's begin by removing some of this code that we wrote a couple lessons earlier. So I'm going to remove these pieces right here, and I'm also going to remove my subtitle constant. And let's say I have a function here. I'll call it myHeader. And I'm just going to define it as an arrow function that accepts no parameters. And in the body of this arrow function, I'm going to drag my line of code right here. I'm going to put it inside the function. So now I have a local constant instead of a global constant that is available in the entire file. And then what I can do, of course, is simply return title on the line below. Now, of course, in this situation, it's kind of silly to assign something to a constant and return it immediately after. There's no real reason to do so. So we can just move this all onto a single line. So right here, I can simply just return an h1 with hello React inside it. All right, so this is, on the surface, a simple JavaScript function that returns JSX, which should totally make sense. But believe it or not, we have stumbled on an incredible discovery here, because this is actually our very first React component. That's absolutely right. We have just created our very first React component. This is a function that returns JSX, and just like functions in JavaScript, functions enable reusability in React. Because if you think about it, we can reinvoke myHeader as many times as we want, and each time we're going to get the same output, the same result. In this case, it's just going to be a little bit of JSX representing an h1, but the fact still remains that we could run this function 5 times and get 5 separate h1 elements, right? And that's sort of the beautiful part of React components, is that they enable us to have reusable chunks of user interface captured in a function. Now, as it turns out, there's actually multiple ways to create JSX or create components in React. This is what's called a function component or a functional component, because it uses a function as the kind of enclosing body to accomplish all of this. To summarize everything, a React function component is just a function that returns JSX. It's a function that returns some chunk of user interface that we are welcome to reuse if we want to by simply reinvoking that function over and over again, right? So that's kind of the only takeaway we have from this lesson. We have accidentally stumbled on a React component. A React component is just a slice of user interface. There's different ways that we can create it. And what we have here is a React function component or a React functional component. It's just a function that returns JSX. It's one way that we can create a component. One final thing before we close off this lesson: when we're dealing with React components, especially React functional components, we want to make sure that we use capital casing. So in traditional JavaScript, you might have used something like myHeader with a lowercase m and a capital H, that's regular upper camel case. In here, we want to make sure we capitalize every first letter of every word. That is a component convention, and I believe it's even required by React in order for these things to work. So whenever you're writing a function that returns JSX, if its name has multiple words, make sure to capitalize the first letter of every single word. If it just has one word like header, then you can capitalize the H in header, but the logic remains the same. All right, that's all there is to cover in this lesson, so I will see you in the next one.